The autumn sun cast long shadows across Wildridge as Willow Nilsen clutched the small bundle to her chest, her heart pounding like a wild mustang against her ribs. The stagecoach had delivered her to this dusty Montana town with nothing but a carpetbag, $5 to her name, and a 3-month-old baby boy with eyes that reminded her of someone she'd tried desperately to forget. As the townsfolk stared with undisguised curiosity at the young woman and her infant, Willow lifted her chin with practiced defiance. This new beginning would be on her terms alone, Montana Territory, 1878. Wildridge had sprung up like so many frontier towns, a collection of wooden structures, hope, and determination carved into the untamed landscape. The promise of silver in the nearby hills had drawn prospectors, merchants, and those seeking to escape their past. Willow counted herself among the latter. "Madam, need help with your bags." A freckle-faced boy of about 12 approached her as she stood uncertainly at the edge of the muddy Main Street. "Thank you kindly." Willow managed a small smile. "Could you direct me to Mrs. Holloway's boarding house?" The boy pointed down the street. "Last building before the smithy. Can't miss it, got them blue shutters." Willow adjusted her hold on the baby and reached for her carpetbag, but the boy was quicker. "I'll carry it for ya. My ma says a lady with a little one shouldn't be luggin' heavy things." "That's very thoughtful of your mother." Willow followed him, aware of the stares following her progress. A single woman with a baby was bound to set tongues wagging. She'd prepared herself for this, rehearsed her story until it felt almost true. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house stood as described, a 2-story wooden structure with faded blue shutters. It looked clean and respectable, which was all Willow could hope for. The boy deposited her bag on the porch and tipped his cap before scampering off, refusing the penny she offered. Before Willow could knock, the door swung open to reveal a plump woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun. Her critical gaze softened when it fell on the sleeping infant. "You must be Miss Nilsen. Received your letter last week." She stepped aside. "I'm Harriet Holloway." "Come in before you both catch your death." The interior was modest but clean, with a parlor furnished in slightly worn but well-maintained pieces. The scent of baking bread permeated the air, making Willow realize how long it had been since she'd eaten. "Thank you for accepting us, Mrs. Holloway. I know taking in a woman with a child isn't customary." "Nonsense. This territory needs more women of good character, especially those willing to work." Mrs. Holloway gestured for Willow to follow her upstairs. "Your letter mentioned you're seeking employment as well as lodging." "Yes, madam. I'm skilled with numbers and correspondence. I was hoping to find clerical work." Mrs. Holloway showed her to a small but tidy room at the end of the hallway. "The general store might need help. Old Mr. Phelps's eyes aren't what they used to be. And there's talk the new doctor needs someone to manage his appointments." Willow set her bag down and gently placed her sleeping son on the bed, creating a barrier of pillows around him. "I'll inquire first thing tomorrow." "And the little one's father?" Mrs. Holloway asked, her voice carefully neutral. Willow had anticipated this question. She straightened her shoulders and met the older woman's gaze directly. "There is no father, Mrs. Holloway, just me. My son is mine alone." If Mrs. Holloway was scandalized, she didn't show it beyond a slight pursing of her lips. "Well, Miss Nilsen, whatever circumstances brought you here, you're in Wildridge now. Small towns have long memories but can have big hearts if you give them reason." She headed toward the door. "Supper's at 6. There's a washroom at the end of the hall." Left alone, Willow sank onto the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment of weakness. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she gazed at her sleeping son, his tiny fist curled against his cheek. "It's just us now, little one," she whispered. "Just us." The baby stirred, his eyes fluttering open to reveal irises the color of a storm-darkened sky, eyes so like his father's that it sometimes stole Willow's breath. She'd named him Samuel after her own father, Samuel Nilsen. Not Samuel Knox, though that was his rightful name. That name belonged to a life she'd left behind, a love that had wounded her deeper than she'd thought possible. The following morning, Willow dressed carefully in her best dress, a modest navy blue with white piping, and arranged her light brown hair in a simple but neat style. After feeding Samuel and securing him in a sling across her chest, she set out to find employment. The general store proved promising. "Mr. Phelps, A wizened man with spectacles perched on his nose brightened considerably when Willow demonstrated her facility with numbers by quickly calculating a customer's purchases. "Can you start tomorrow?" he asked. 8 to 4, 6 days a week. Sundays off for church, of course. "And my son," Willow indicated the sleeping infant. Mr. Phelps scratched his chin. "Bring him along. As long as he's not disruptive, I don't see the harm. My wife might even watch him in the back room if needed. She loves babies, but our daughters have all moved away." Relief flooded Willow. "Thank you, Mr. Phelps. I'll be here at 8 sharp." As she exited the store, the baby now awake and looking around with wide-eyed curiosity, Willow felt a small measure of hope. Perhaps they could make a life here after all. Her hope dimmed slightly when she nearly collided with a tall figure on the boardwalk. Strong hands steadied her, and she looked up into a face that made her blood run cold. Time seemed to freeze as she stared into familiar stormy blue eyes, the same eyes she saw every time she looked at her son. Older, perhaps, with new lines at the corners, but unmistakably the same, Tucker Knox's expression shifted from polite concern to shock as recognition dawned. His gaze dropped to the infant in her arms, lingered there, then returned to her face with questions she wasn't ready to answer. "Willow." His voice was a hoarse whisper, as if he'd seen a ghost. She stepped back, breaking contact with his steadying hands. "Excuse me," she managed, attempting to move past him. "Willow, wait." His voice was stronger now, commanding in a way that made several passers-by turn their heads. She kept walking, her heart thundering in her chest. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Tucker Knox was supposed to be in Colorado, living the life he'd chosen over her. What cruel twist of fate had brought him to this remote Montana town? Willow. He caught up to her in a few long strides, positioning himself in front of her. "Please just talk to me." She glanced around, aware of the curious stares. "Not here," she hissed. "Not now." Tucker's eyes were fixed on Samuel, who had turned his head at the sound of the deep voice. "The baby is none of your concern," Willow cut him off sharply. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to return to my lodgings." Tucker's face hardened, but he stepped aside. "This conversation isn't over, Willow." She hurried away, clutching Samuel tighter, her carefully constructed new beginning already crumbling around her. Back in her room at the boarding house, Willow paced frantically, trying to calm both Samuel and herself. The baby, sensing her distress, had begun to fuss. "SHH, sweetheart, it's all right," she soothed, though her own voice trembled. How had this happened? What were the odds that Tucker Knox would be in Wildridge, Montana, of all places? A soft knock at her door startled her. "Miss Nilsen," Mrs. Holloway called, "there's a gentleman asking after you. Says he's an old acquaintance." Willow closed her eyes briefly. "Please tell him I'm indisposed, Mrs. Holloway." There was a pause. "He seems quite determined, dear, says it's important." Willow knew Tucker well enough to know he wouldn't simply leave. The man had the stubborn persistence of a mountain goat. Better to face him now on her terms than have him create a scene. "Very well. Please tell him I'll meet him in the parlor in 10 minutes. She used that time to compose herself and settle Samuel. The baby, exhausted from his earlier distress, had fallen asleep. Willow carefully placed him in the middle of the bed, surrounded by pillows, and took a deep breath before heading downstairs. Tucker stood by the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the late morning light. He'd removed his hat, revealing hair the color of burnished copper, a shade darker than she remembered. He turned as she entered, and the intensity of his gaze made her falter slightly. "We can talk here," she said, choosing a chair rather than the sofa where he might sit too close. "Mrs. Holloway has given us privacy." Tucker remained standing, his hat turning slowly in his hands. "You're a difficult woman to find, Willow Nilsen." "I wasn't aware you were looking." His jaw tightened. 2 years. I've been searching for 2 years. This surprised her. "Why?" "You made your choice quite clear when you left." "Is that what you think happened?" Tucker took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "Willow, I never chose to leave you. I was sent away. My father, I know about your father's ultimatum," she interrupted. "You chose your inheritance over me. I understood then, and I understand now." Tucker's expression darkened. "No, you don't understand at all. My father told me you'd decided you didn't want the life I could offer, that you'd left town willingly. By the time I discovered his lie and returned to find you, you were gone." Willow's mind reeled. Could it be true? Had Theodore Knox lied to them both? The elder Knox had never approved of his son's relationship with a schoolteacher of modest means. He'd made that abundantly clear. "Even if that's true," she said carefully, "it doesn't change our circumstances now." Tucker's gaze was steady. "The baby upstairs. He's mine, isn't he?" Willow had prepared for many scenarios, but direct confrontation within hours of arriving in town wasn't one of them. She considered lying, but looking into Tucker's eyes, the same eyes that greeted her every morning when she looked at her son, she couldn't form the words. Her silence was answer enough. "How old is he?" Tucker asked, his voice rough with emotion. 3 months. Willow's hands twisted in her lap. "His name is Samuel." Tucker sank onto the sofa, looking as if his legs could no longer support him. "Samuel," he repeated softly, "after your father." That he remembered this detail from their conversations years ago caught Willow off guard. "Yes. Why didn't you try to find me, Willow?" "You were carrying my child." "I wrote to you," she admitted. "The letter came back unopened. Your father's doing, I suppose." Tucker ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Willow's heart ache. "I have a son," he said, as if testing the words. "A son I knew nothing about." "And now you do," Willow said, standing. "But nothing has changed. I came to Wildridge for a fresh start. Samuel and I will make our way without interference." Tucker rose as well, towering over her. "If you think I'm going to walk away from my son now that I know he exists, you don't know me at all, Willow. And if you think you can simply step into our lives after 2 years of absence, you don't know me, Tucker Knox." She moved toward the door. "I need time to think." "Time, yes," he agreed, surprising her. "But not distance, not anymore." He reached for his hat. "I won't push, Willow, but I won't disappear either. That child upstairs is my flesh and blood." "He's my son," Willow insisted. Tucker's expression softened. "He's our son, whether you're ready to accept that or not." He settled his hat on his head. "I'm staying at the hotel. When you're ready to talk, really talk, send word." After he left, Willow remained in the parlor, trying to process everything that had happened. Tucker's revelation about his father's deception had shaken her. Had she spent 2 years nursing anger and hurt based on a lie? And what did it mean for her plans, for Samuel's future? The next morning, Willow arrived at the general store promptly at 8, Samuel secured in his sling. Mr. Phelps introduced her to his wife, Emma, a kind-faced woman who immediately cooed over the baby. "What a handsome little man," Emma said, gently touching Samuel's cheek. "He has the most striking eyes." Willow tensed, waiting for the inevitable comparison, but it didn't come. Of course, Emma Phelps wouldn't know that Samuel's eyes were identical to Tucker Knox's. As far as Willow knew, Tucker had never lived in Wildridge before. "Thank you," she replied. "He's usually quite good-natured, but if he becomes fussy, I can tend to him." "Nonsense," Emma said. "I've raised 5 children. A fussy baby doesn't frighten me one bit. You focus on helping George with the books." The work proved straightforward. Mr. Phelps's ledgers needed organizing, and there was inventory to be counted and recorded. Willow lost herself in the familiar comfort of numbers and lists, grateful for the distraction from her tumultuous thoughts. Around midday, the bell above the door jingled, and Willow looked up to see Tucker entering the store. He nodded politely to Mr. Phelps before his gaze found her behind the counter. "Miss Nilsen," he greeted her formally, "I see you've found employment." "Mr. Knox," she returned stiffly, aware of Mr. Phelps's curious glance between them. "You two acquainted?" the shopkeeper asked. Tucker answered before Willow could. "We knew each other back in Colorado. Miss Nilsen was the school teacher in my hometown." It wasn't a lie, but it was far from the whole truth. Willow had indeed been the school teacher in Silver Creek, where the Knox family owned half the businesses and most of the surrounding ranchland. What Tucker omitted was how they'd fallen in love despite the social gulf between them, how they'd planned to marry against his father's wishes, and how it had all fallen apart. "Small world," Mr. Phelps commented. "What brings you to our counter today, Mr. Knox?" "Supplies for the ranch," Tucker replied. "I'll need flour, coffee, salt, and some of that tobacco you keep behind the counter." Willow busied herself with writing down his order, avoiding his gaze. "Ranch," she couldn't help asking. "The Triple K north of town," Tucker explained. "I purchased it 6 months ago." So he hadn't just arrived in Wildridge by coincidence. He'd been here establishing himself while she'd been struggling alone with their newborn son. Mr. Phelps gathered the items Tucker requested. "Knox has brought that old Blackwell place back to life." Hiring local men, investing in good stock, town's fortunate to have him. Tucker shrugged modestly. I saw potential here. Sometimes a man needs to forge his own path away from family expectations. The pointed comment wasn't lost on Willow. She handed him the receipt, careful not to let their fingers touch. Your total comes to $3.45, she said. Tucker placed $4 on the counter. Keep the change. His eyes sought hers. How is the little one today? The casual inquiry made in front of Mr. Phelps put Willow in an awkward position. She couldn't very well refuse to answer without arousing suspicion. He's well, thank you for asking. Glad to hear it. Tucker collected his purchases. Good day, Miss Nilsen, Mr. Phelps. After he left, Mr. Phelps raised an eyebrow. Friendly fellow that Knox seems to have taken an interest in your welfare. We were merely acquaintances, Willow said dismissively. I'm sure he's just being polite. If you say so. Mr. Phelps didn't look convinced. Though a respectable man like that showing interest in a young mother might not be the worst thing, if you don't mind my saying. Willow changed the subject by asking about inventory procedures, but the encounter left her unsettled. Tucker clearly intended to maintain contact, and in a town the size of Wildridge, avoiding him would be impossible. That evening, while feeding Samuel in her room, Willow was startled by another knock at her door. A package for you, Miss Nilsen, Mrs. Holloway called. Willow answered the door with Samuel cradled against her shoulder, accepting a small wooden crate from her landlady. Delivered by one of the Knox ranch hands, Mrs. Holloway informed her with obvious curiosity. Quite heavy for its size. After thanking her, Willow closed the door and set the crate on her bed. It was secured with a simple clasp rather than nails, suggesting it was meant to be opened easily. Inside, she found jars of preserved peaches and blackberries, a small sack of hard candies, a tin of expensive tea, and a folded piece of paper. The note was brief. Things I remember you enjoyed. The offer to talk stands whenever you're ready. TK. Willow sat heavily on the edge of the bed. The gifts were thoughtful, reminding her of their walks through the orchards near Silver Creek, of evenings spent sharing tea and conversation. Tucker remembered the details of their time together, just as she did. Samuel made a small sound of contentment, having finished nursing. Willow shifted him to look into his face, Tucker's eyes, Tucker's chin, though perhaps her nose. How long could she realistically keep father and son apart when they lived in the same small town? The next Sunday, Willow dressed carefully for church, putting Samuel in the one good outfit she'd managed to sew for him. Church attendance was as much a social obligation as a spiritual one in frontier towns, and she knew her continued absence would only fuel gossip. The small white church at the end of Main Street was nearly full when she arrived. Willow slipped into a pew near the back, nodding politely to those who turned to look at the newcomer and her baby. Halfway through the opening hymn, she felt someone slide into the pew beside her. Tucker's deep voice joined the congregation in singing Amazing Grace, the same hymn they'd once discussed on a summer evening beneath a Colorado sky. Samuel, who had been contentedly gumming his fist, turned at the sound of Tucker's voice. His tiny face lit with what almost seemed like recognition, though Willow knew that was impossible. Still, the baby reached a hand toward Tucker, who gently offered his finger for Samuel to grasp. The simple gesture her son's tiny fingers wrapped around his father's much larger one brought unexpected tears to Willow's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, focusing on the hymnal. After the service, Willow found herself surrounded by curious townsfolk eager to meet the new arrival. She introduced herself as a widow seeking a fresh start, the story she'd prepared, and presented Samuel as my son to each person who admired him. Tucker stood a few feet away, his expression unreadable as he watched her repeat the careful lie. When the local banker's wife commented on Samuel's unusual eye color, Tucker stepped forward. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell," he greeted the woman. "I see you've met Miss Nilsen and her boy." "Indeed," the woman replied. "Such a striking child. Those eyes are quite remarkable, aren't they?" Tucker's gaze met Willow's over the woman's head. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "Remarkable indeed." The tension between them was palpable, but before the moment could extend, the pastor approached to welcome Willow to the congregation. "Miss Nilsen, we're delighted to have you and your little one join us," Reverend Coleman said warmly. Will you be staying in Wildridge long? I hope to make a permanent home here, Reverend, Willow replied. Mr. Phelps has kindly employed me at the general store. Excellent, excellent. And the child's father? He asked. Glancing at the gold band, Willow wore her mother's ring, repurposed to give her the protection of presumed widowhood. My husband passed before Samuel was born, she said, the practiced lie coming easily. It's just the two of us now. From the corner of her eye, she saw Tucker's jaw tighten, but he remained silent. The Reverend offered his condolences and moved on to greet other parishioners. Tucker used the opportunity to approach Willow directly. I'd like to speak with you, he said quietly. Privately. Willow hesitated, but the determined set of his shoulders told her he wouldn't be put off indefinitely. This afternoon, she conceded. I'll meet you by the creek behind Mrs. Holloway's at 3 o'clock. Tucker nodded. I'll be there. The creek provided relative privacy while still being within sight of the boarding house, a compromise between propriety and the need for confidential conversation. Willow arrived precisely at 3, Samuel sleeping peacefully in his sling. Tucker was already there, skipping stones across the water with practiced ease. He straightened when he heard her approach, his expression softening at the sight of the sleeping infant. Thank you for coming, he said. You didn't give me much choice. Willow sat on a fallen log, adjusting Samuel against her chest. Tucker remained standing. How long do you plan to continue the charade, Willow, pretending to be a widow, denying me as Samuel's father? His directness caught her off guard. It's not a charade, it's protection. A single mother faces challenges a widow doesn't. And what about Samuel's right to know his father, my right to be acknowledged as his father? Willow's temper flared. Rights? You speak of rights when you disappeared for 2 years. When I faced pregnancy and childbirth alone, with no support and no idea where you were, Tucker crouched before her, his eyes intense. I told you my father lied to us both. The moment I learned the truth, I started searching for you. I went back to Silver Creek, then to your hometown. I followed every lead I could find. And now what? You expect to step into our lives as if nothing happened? Willow shook her head. It's not that simple, Tucker. I know it's not simple, he said, his voice gentler. But he's my son, Willow, my blood. When I look at him, I see. He trailed off, emotion making his voice rough. You see yourself, she finished for him. I know, I see it too, every day. Tucker reached out hesitantly, his fingers hovering near Samuel's cheek but not quite touching. May I hold him? The request, so simple and yet so momentous, made Willow's heart constrict. She had imagined this moment differently in a small house they would share, with wedding rings on their fingers and joy in their hearts. Not like this, beside a creek in a town where they were practically strangers. But she couldn't deny Tucker this, not when Samuel was as much his as hers. Carefully, she lifted the sleeping baby from the sling and placed him in his father's arms. Tucker held his son with surprising competence, supporting Samuel's head naturally. Hello, little man, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. I'm your pa. Samuel stirred, his eyes opening to meet Tucker's matching gaze. For a breathless moment, father and son regarded each other, and Willow saw something pass between them, a recognition that transcended their brief acquaintance. Tucker looked up at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He's perfect, Willow. Yes, she agreed softly. He is. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the babbling creek and Samuel's occasional coos as he studied his father's face with obvious fascination. I've built something here, Tucker finally said. The ranch is doing well. I have a good house, sturdy and warm, room for a family. He met her gaze directly. I want you both to come live with me as my wife and son. Willow stiffened. You can't simply propose marriage as a solution to a complicated situation. I'm not proposing because of the situation, Tucker countered. I'm proposing because I never stopped loving you, Willow, not for a single day in 2 years. The declaration hung between them, stirring emotions Willow had tried to bury. Love isn't always enough, Tucker. We learned that in Silver Creek. No, we learned that interference and lies can separate even the strongest hearts, he corrected. But we're not in Silver Creek anymore. My father has no influence here. This is our chance to build the life we planned, the family we created. Samuel began to fuss, hungry after his nap. Willow reached for him and Tucker reluctantly handed the baby back. I need time, she said, settling Samuel to nurse discreetly beneath a light blanket. This is too much, too quickly. Tucker stood, respectfully averting his eyes. Time, yes, but I won't wait forever, Willow. Samuel deserves a father, and I intend to be one to him with or without your blessing. The quiet determination in his voice was both reassuring and unsettling. This was the Tucker she remembered, steadfast, principled, unwavering once his mind was set. What do you mean by that? She asked warily. I mean, I'll respect your wishes for now, but eventually the truth will come out. Small towns have a way of uncovering secrets. Tucker picked up a stone and sent it skipping across the water. I'd rather we control how and when that happens instead of letting gossip do it for us. Willow knew he was right. Samuel's resemblance to Tucker was too strong to go unnoticed indefinitely. Someone would eventually make the connection, especially if Tucker continued to show interest in them. I'll think about what you've said, she promised. But I won't be rushed into decisions that affect my son's future. Our son, Tucker corrected gently, and I understand. When you're ready to talk again, you know where to find me. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving Willow with conflicting emotions and a decision that seemed impossible to make. The following weeks established a tentative pattern. Tucker visited the general store regularly, ostensibly for supplies but clearly to see Willow and Samuel. He was unfailingly polite, never pushing beyond the boundaries Willow set, but his presence was a constant reminder of the unresolved situation between them. To Willow's surprise, Emma Phelps became a staunch ally. The older woman doted on Samuel during working hours, allowing Willow to focus on the store's accounts without worry. That Knox fellow has his eye on you, Emma observed one afternoon as they watched Tucker ride away from the store. Comes in far more often than a man with his provisions needs to. Willow busied herself with straightening a display of canned goods. He's just being neighborly, Emma snorted softly. Neighborly as nodding hello on the street. That man looks at you like a starving man eyes a feast. She bounced Samuel on her hip. And he certainly has a fondness for this little one. We knew each other before, Willow admitted, knowing she needed to offer some explanation for Tucker's obvious interest. In Colorado, Emma said, understanding dawning in her eyes. An old flame then? Something like that. Emma studied Samuel's face thoughtfully. The boy favors him, doesn't he? Around the eyes particularly. Willow's hand stilled on the cans. I don't know what you mean. Don't fret, dear, your secret's safe with me. Emma lowered her voice. But secrets have a way of revealing themselves, especially ones with eyes as distinctive as this little fellow's. Willow felt a mixture of relief and anxiety at having her situation recognized. It's complicated, Mrs. Phelps. Life usually is, especially matters of the heart. Emma handed Samuel back to Willow. But that man clearly wants to do right by you both. In my experience, that's rarer than gold dust. That evening, as Willow prepared for bed, a commotion in the street drew her to the window. A group of cowboys, clearly intoxicated, were arguing loudly outside the saloon. She recognized them as hands from the Bitterroot Ranch, owned by a man named Harlan Mercer who had a reputation for hiring rough men and paying little attention to their behavior in town. As she watched, Tucker emerged from the hotel across the street, his tall figure unmistakable even in the dim light of the street lamps. He approached the rowdy group, saying something Willow couldn't hear. One of the cowboys, a burly man with a wild beard, shoved Tucker hard. Willow's heart leaped into her throat as she saw Tucker stumble back, then regain his footing. Instead of returning the aggression, he simply stood his ground, speaking calmly despite the obvious tension. Whatever he said must have been effective, because the cowboys eventually moved on, though not without a few parting curses. The incident, brief as it was, reminded Willow of Tucker's character. He'd always preferred reason to violence, though she knew he could defend himself when necessary. It was one of the qualities she'd first admired in him, his quiet strength that had no need for bravado. The next day at the store, Willow overheard customers discussing the confrontation. Knox stood up to Mercer's boys without even raising a fist, one man reported admiringly. Told them there were ladies and children trying to sleep, and they'd best take their celebrations elsewhere or deal with him and the sheriff both. Man's got sand, another agreed. Mercer's crowd doesn't back down easy. Hear he was some kind of lawman back east before he came here, a third added. Knows how to handle trouble without causing more. This was news to Willow. Tucker had never mentioned working in law enforcement. In Silver Creek, he'd been learning the family business, preparing to eventually take over his father's holdings. What had happened in the 2 years since she'd last seen him? That afternoon, Samuel was particularly fussy, fighting sleep despite being clearly exhausted. Emma had gone home early with a headache, leaving Willow to manage both the store and her cranky infant. "Perhaps he's teething," Mr. Phelps suggested, watching Willow bounce the crying baby. "My youngest would carry on something fierce when a tooth was coming in." "Perhaps," Willow agreed, though Samuel seemed too young for teething. "I'm sorry for the disruption. Nonsense, babies will be babies." Mr. Phelps waved away her concern. "Why don't you take him for a walk? Sometimes fresh air helps. I can mind the store for an hour." Grateful for his understanding, Willow wrapped Samuel in his blanket and stepped out into the crisp autumn air. The main street was relatively quiet, with most people occupied with afternoon work. She walked slowly, humming softly to Samuel, who gradually settled against her shoulder. Without consciously planning it, Willow found herself on the northern edge of town, looking out toward the mountains where Tucker's ranch lay. The Triple K was visible in the distance, a collection of buildings nestled in a valley with grazing land spreading out around it. "Your father's land," she murmured to Samuel, who had finally drifted into sleep. "He built it for us, though he didn't know it at the time." "Actually, I did know it." Tucker's voice came from behind her. Willow turned, startled to find him approaching on horseback. He dismounted with easy grace, leading his horse the last few yards. "I bought that land with you in mind," he continued. "Even when I couldn't find you, I never stopped believing I would eventually. I wanted to have something worthy to offer when I did." The admission touched Willow more deeply than she expected. "You changed your plans," she said. "You were meant to take over your father's businesses." Tucker's expression hardened slightly. "That future died the day I discovered my father's deception. I wanted nothing more from him or the life he'd planned for me." His gaze softened as it fell on Samuel. "Has he been giving you trouble today?" "Just fighting sleep," Willow replied, "though he seems to have surrendered now." Tucker smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features. "Strong-willed like his mother." "And his father," Willow added without thinking. Tucker's smile deepened at this small acknowledgement of his paternity. "May I walk with you a while, unless you'd prefer to be alone?" Willow hesitated, then nodded. "You can walk with us." They strolled in companionable silence for a few minutes, the sleeping Samuel a bridge between them. "I heard about last night," Willow finally said. "With Mercer's men," Tucker shrugged. "Nothing serious, they'd had too much whiskey and too little sense." "The talk in town is that you were a lawman before coming here." "Deputy marshal in Wyoming for a time," Tucker confirmed. "After I left Silver Creek, I needed work that didn't involve my father's connections. Turned out I had a knack for keeping the peace." Willow tried to reconcile this new information with the Tucker she'd known. "It seems a far cry from managing railroad investments and cattle markets." "It was," he agreed. "But it taught me a lot about people, what drives them, what they value, what they fear. Useful knowledge for any endeavor." He glanced at her. "What about you, after you left Silver Creek?" Willow hadn't expected him to ask about her experiences. "I went to Denver initially, stayed with a distant cousin, found work as a bookkeeper for a millinery shop." She shifted Samuel to her other shoulder. "When my condition became apparent, I had to leave. Unwed mothers aren't welcomed in respectable establishments." Tucker's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have had to face that alone." "No," she agreed softly, "but I did." They had reached the creek again, the same spot where they'd talked before. Tucker gestured to a fallen log. "Would you like to sit?" He seemed soundly asleep now. Willow nodded, carefully settling herself without disturbing Samuel. Tucker remained standing, looking out over the water. "I want to court you properly, Willow," he said after a moment. "Not rush you into marriage, not pressure you with Samuel's parentage, just court you as I should have been allowed to do in Silver Creek." The proposal surprised her. It wasn't what she'd expected: demands about Samuel, insistence on his rights, perhaps even threats to reveal the truth if she didn't comply. Instead, Tucker was offering patience, offering to rebuild what had been broken between them. "People would talk," she said. A widow being courted so soon after arriving in town. Tucker turned to face her. "People always talk, But they'll talk more if we continue this awkward dance of pretending to be casual acquaintances while I visit the store 3 times a week for supplies no man needs." A reluctant smile tugged at Willow's lips. "Mrs. Phelps already suspects the truth about Samuel. She's an observant woman," Tucker acknowledged, "and kind from what I've seen. She is." Willow looked down at her sleeping son. What would this courtship entail exactly? "Dinner at the hotel restaurant, accompanying you to church, rides in my buggy on Sunday afternoons, proper visits at Mrs. Holloway's parlor." Tucker's lips quirked. "All very respectable, I assure you." The normalcy of it appealed to Willow more than she wanted to admit. After 2 years of struggling alone, of careful lies and constant vigilance, the idea of simply being courted like any other young woman was unexpectedly alluring. "And Samuel," she asked, "what do we tell people about him?" "For now, nothing changes in public. He remains your son, a widow's child." Tucker's expression grew serious. "But in private, between us, we acknowledge the truth. And when the time is right, if you decide to accept me, we'll find a way to transition the story naturally." It was a reasonable proposal, more considerate than Willow had expected. Still, she hesitated, wary of trusting too quickly, of being hurt again. "I need to be sure, Tucker, sure of your intentions, sure of my own feelings." "Of course." He knelt before her, bringing himself to eye level. "I'm not asking for an immediate answer, Willow. Just an opportunity to show you that what we could still have is worth fighting for." Samuel stirred in her arms, making small sounds of waking. Tucker watched as the baby's eyes fluttered open, immediately finding and focusing on his father's face. "Hello again, young man," Tucker said softly. Samuel responded with what almost seemed like a smile, his tiny hands reaching toward the familiar voice. Watching them together, Willow felt something shift inside her, a loosening of the protective shell she'd built around her heart. This was what Samuel deserved, a father who looked at him with such undisguised love, who wanted to be part of his life. "One dinner," she said finally. "We can start with one dinner and see where it leads." Tucker's smile was answer enough. Their first official outing took place the following Friday evening at the hotel restaurant, the most respectable establishment in Wildridge. Tucker arrived at Mrs. Holloway's promptly at 6, dressed in a well-tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and trim waist. Mrs. Holloway, clearly delighted by the development, had offered to watch Samuel for the evening. "A new mother deserves a few hours of adult conversation," she'd insisted. "The little one and I will do just fine." Willow had been reluctant to leave Samuel, having never been separated from him before, but she recognized the importance of this step. She'd worn her best dress, a dark green that complemented her hazel eyes, and arranged her hair more elaborately than usual. Tucker's appreciative gaze when she descended the stairs made the effort worthwhile. "You look beautiful," he said simply. The restaurant was busy but not crowded, with white tablecloths and actual glass windows, a luxury on the frontier. Tucker had reserved a table near the back, offering some privacy while remaining in public view. "I ordered ahead," he explained as they were seated. "The cook here makes an excellent roast beef when given proper notice." Conversation flowed more easily than Willow had expected. They began with safe topics: the changing leaves, the upcoming harvest festival, town gossip about the new schoolteacher's apparent interest in the young blacksmith. Gradually, they moved to more personal subjects. "Tell me about the ranch," Willow requested as they enjoyed their meal. "How did you come to purchase it?" Tucker described how he'd traveled through the Montana Territory after his time as a deputy, looking for somewhere to settle. The previous owner, Old Man Blackwell, was returning east to live with his daughter after his wife passed. The place had good water, decent grazing land, and a solid house. "I knew immediately it was what I'd been searching for." "And you've been here 6 months, nearly 8 now," Tucker corrected. "Spent the first months repairing fences, fixing the roof, hiring hands. It's coming along well." His eyes held hers across the table. "The house has 4 bedrooms. I kept thinking there should be a family to fill them someday." Willow looked down at her plate, both touched and cautious. "You speak as if you always intended to find me." "I did," Tucker said simply. "Even when the trail went cold, I never stopped looking, never stopped hoping." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could reconsider. "After so much time, why not simply start fresh with someone else?" Tucker's expression grew serious. "Because I made you a promise, Willow." Not just with words, but with my heart, the kind of promise that doesn't expire with time or distance. He reached across the table, his fingers lightly touching hers. And now there's Samuel, a living embodiment of what we shared. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. This was the Tucker she remembered, forthright, honorable to his core, a man whose word was his bond. I want to believe you, she admitted softly, but I've learned to be cautious, understandably so. Tucker withdrew his hand, respecting her boundaries. I don't expect your trust overnight, Willow. I'm prepared to earn it back day by day. After dinner, they walked slowly back to the boarding house, the autumn evening crisp but not uncomfortable. Tucker maintained a proper distance between them, though Willow was acutely aware of his presence beside her. At Mrs. Holloway's porch, they found the landlady rocking gently in her chair, Samuel sleeping peacefully in her arms. Not a peep from this little angel, she reported. Took his bottle like a champion and drifted right off. Willow carefully took her son, heart swelling with love as she cradled him close. Thank you for watching him, Mrs. Holloway. My pleasure entirely. The older woman's knowing gaze moved between Willow and Tucker. You two have a nice evening. Very nice, Tucker confirmed, his eyes on Willow. Perhaps we might do it again sometime, Willow nodded, surprising herself with how readily she agreed. I'd like that. The courtship progressed gradually over the following weeks. Sunday drives in Tucker's buggy became a regular occurrence, with Samuel accompanying them. Tucker proved adept at handling the baby, his large hands gentle and sure as he held his son. On these outings, away from the town's curious eyes, they spoke more openly about their past and the deception that had separated them. Tucker described his frantic return to Silver Creek after discovering his father's lies, only to find Willow had left weeks earlier with no forwarding address. Your landlady wouldn't tell me anything, he recalled as they sat beside a small lake north of town, Samuel dozing in a basket between them. Said you'd made her promise. Mrs. Finch was protecting me, Willow explained. I told her I needed to disappear completely. I was afraid your father would find me if I left too many traces. A justified fear, Tucker acknowledged grimly. He was furious when I confronted him about his deception, said he'd done what was necessary to prevent me from throwing away my future on a penniless schoolteacher. Willow winced at the description. He never thought I was good enough for you. No, he thought I wasn't strong enough to choose my own path. Tucker plucked a late wildflower and twirled it between his fingers. He was wrong. I chose you then and I choose you now. The only difference is that now I have the means to support that choice without his approval or assistance. As autumn deepened toward winter, Willow found her resistance weakening. Tucker was patient but persistent, showing up with small gifts for Samuel, offering help when needed, becoming a steady presence in their lives. The townsfolk had accepted their courtship with minimal gossip, most assuming it was a natural progression between two people with a shared past. Emma Phelps became Willow's confidante, offering wisdom from her 40 years of marriage. That man loves you, she stated plainly one afternoon as they watched Tucker chopping wood behind the store, a task he'd volunteered for, when Mr. Phelps mentioned his rheumatism was acting up. And he loves that boy as his own. He is his own, Willow admitted quietly, finally sharing the full truth with someone. Tucker is Samuel's father, Emma nodded, unsurprised. I figured as much, those eyes are distinctive. We were to be married in Colorado, but circumstances separated us before I knew I was expecting. Willow watched as Tucker's axe split another log with precise force. He didn't know about Samuel until we met here. And now he wants to make things right, Emma concluded. Seems straightforward enough to me. Is it? Willow sighed. I've built a life without him, learned to be independent to make my own decisions. Being married doesn't mean surrendering independence, Emma countered. Not with the right man. George and I have been partners for 4 decades. He respects my mind and my choices as I do his. Willow considered this. Tucker had never attempted to control her, even now when he had every right to demand acknowledgement as Samuel's father. Instead, he was waiting for her to come to him willingly, allowing her the space to decide their future on her terms. The first snow fell in early November, transforming Wildridge into a winter wonderland. Tucker arrived at the boarding house with a small sleigh, bundled in a heavy coat and carrying a thick buffalo robe. Thought you and Samuel might enjoy a ride, he suggested. The snow's perfect for it. Willow hesitated, looking out at the white landscape. It seems cold for the baby. I've warmed bricks wrapped in flannel for our feet, and the buffalo robe will keep you both snug, Tucker assured her. Just a short ride to see the lights of town from Harper's Hill. The prospect was tempting. Willow had been cooped up for days as the storm passed, and Samuel was becoming restless with the confinement. Very well, she agreed, going to bundle Samuel in his warmest clothes. The sleigh ride was magical. Tucker had attached small bells to the harness, their cheerful jingling accompanying the soft shush of runners on fresh snow. Samuel was wide-eyed with wonder at the new experience, his tiny face peeking out from layers of blankets. Harper's Hill provided a perfect vantage point over Wildridge, the town's windows glowing with lamplight against the twilight sky. Tucker brought the sleigh to a halt at the summit, wrapping the buffalo robe more securely around Willow and Samuel. Beautiful, isn't it? He said, gesturing toward the view. Peaceful, Willow nodded, struck by the serenity of the scene. In that moment, with Samuel warm against her chest and Tucker's solid presence beside her, she felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. I've been thinking, Tucker said after a comfortable silence. About our situation. Willow tensed slightly. Oh, winter's setting in. The roads will be difficult soon, especially for daily travel between the ranch and town. Tucker's gaze remained on the distant lights. I've rented the small house behind the mercantile. It became available when the Wilsons moved to Oregon last month. This was unexpected. You're moving into town, Tucker turned to face her. Temporarily. It makes more sense than trying to make the journey from the ranch every day in deep snow. This way I can be closer to, he paused, then continued carefully, to you and Samuel, if you'll allow it. The consideration behind the gesture touched Willow deeply. Tucker was adapting his life to accommodate hers rather than expecting the reverse. The ranch will be fine, he continued, answering her unasked question. My foreman is capable and I'll ride out regularly to check on things, but this way I won't miss Samuel's first Christmas. The mention of Christmas, only a few weeks away, brought home how quickly time was passing. Samuel was growing daily, becoming more alert and responsive. Soon he would be sitting up, crawling, speaking his first words. The thought of Tucker missing these milestones suddenly seemed wrong, unnecessarily punitive. I think that's a sensible arrangement, Willow said softly. Samuel should have his father nearby. Tucker's expression brightened at this tacit acknowledgement of his role. Thank you, Willow, that means more than you know. As they returned to town, snowflakes began to fall again, landing on Tucker's hat and shoulders. Willow was struck by how right this felt the three of them together. Like the family they were meant to be. The week before Christmas, disaster struck. A fire broke out in the livery stable in the middle of the night, quickly spreading to the adjacent buildings in the dry winter air. The town's bucket brigade formed immediately, with every able-bodied person joining the effort to contain the blaze. Willow watched anxiously from Mrs. Holloway's porch. Samuel clutched to her chest, as Tucker worked alongside the other men passing buckets of water from the town pump. The flames cast an eerie orange glow over the scene, illuminating faces streaked with soot and determination. When the general store caught fire, Mr. Phelps collapsed in distress, clutching his chest. Tucker and another man carried him to safety, laying him on a blanket where Doc Miller immediately began examination. Heart attack, the doctor pronounced grimly. We need to get him inside, keep him warm and still. As the night progressed, the fire was finally contained, though several buildings were lost entirely. The general store had suffered significant damage to its rear portion, but the main structure remained standing, a small mercy in an otherwise devastating event. By dawn, exhaustion had claimed most of the townspeople. Tucker, his face blackened with soot and his clothes singed in places, finally made his way to where Willow waited. Phelps, he asked hoarsely. Stable for now, Willow replied. Emma's with him at the doctor's. Tucker nodded wearily, swaying slightly on his feet. Without thinking, Willow reached out to steady him, her hand on his arm. You should rest, she urged. You've been fighting the fire for hours. Need to check on the others first, he insisted, though his eyes were heavy with fatigue. Make sure everyone's accounted for. Tucker, Willow's voice was firm. You can't help anyone if you collapse. Come inside just for an hour, please. Her concern finally penetrated his exhaustion. He allowed her to lead him into Mrs. Holloway's parlor, where he sank onto the sofa. Samuel, who had been remarkably quiet throughout the night's chaos, reached for Tucker from Willow's arms. "Hey, little man," Tucker murmured, taking the baby despite his obvious exhaustion. "Everything's all right now." Samuel settled against his father's chest with complete trust, tiny fingers curling into Tucker's shirt. Within minutes, both father and son were asleep, their breathing synchronized in the quiet room. Willow stood watching them, a lump forming in her throat. The image before her, Tucker protectively cradling Samuel, even in sleep, crystallized something she'd been feeling for weeks. These two were her family, her home. The walls she'd built around her heart had crumbled, revealing the truth she'd tried to deny. She still loved Tucker Knox, perhaps more deeply now than before. The fire's aftermath brought changes to Wildridge. Mr. Phelps, though recovering, was advised by the doctor to retire from active business. With the store damaged and its owner unable to manage repairs, the future of Willow's employment looked uncertain. "I don't know what we'll do," Emma confided tearfully when Willow visited them. "The store was everything to George, our livelihood, our purpose." "What if someone else managed it?" Willow suggested. "Handled the repairs, the restocking, the daily operations while keeping you both as owners." Emma looked up hopefully. "Who would do that?" The answer came later that day when Tucker, having heard of the conversation, approached the Phelpses with a proposal. He would finance the repairs and manage the store until Mr. Phelps recovered, with Willow handling the books as before. The arrangement would be a partnership with profits shared equitably. "Why would you do this?" Mr. Phelps asked suspiciously from his sick. "What's your stake in our store?" Tucker glanced at Willow before answering. "Let's just say I have a vested interest in ensuring Miss Nilsen remains employed in Wildridge, and I believe in helping neighbors in need." The arrangement was agreed upon, and work began immediately to repair the store in time for the new year. Tucker threw himself into the project with characteristic energy, hiring carpenters and personally overseeing the reconstruction. Christmas arrived amid the rebuilding, a subdued but meaningful celebration for the recovering town. Mrs. Holloway hosted a small dinner for her boarders and invited Tucker to join them. Sitting around the table with Samuel in his lap, Tucker looked more content than Willow had ever seen him. After dinner, when the other boarders had retired to the parlor for coffee, Tucker drew Willow aside. "I have something for you," he said, producing a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. "For both of you, actually." Willow unwrapped it carefully to reveal a small velvet box. Inside lay a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When she opened it, she found a tiny daguerreotype of Tucker on one side and an empty space on the other. "I thought we might have Samuel's portrait made for the other half," Tucker explained, "so he can always carry both his parents with him." Tears sprang to Willow's eyes at the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." Tucker's hand covered hers, warm and strong. "Willow, I know you're still cautious and I respect that, but I want you to know that my feelings haven't changed. I still want to make you my wife, to give Samuel my name, to build a life together." Willow looked up into his earnest face, seeing the boy she'd fallen in love with and the man he'd become. The man who'd searched for her across state lines, who'd built a home with her in mind, who'd moved to town to be near his son, who'd stepped in to save the Phelpses' livelihood without hesitation. "Yes," she said simply. Tucker blinked as if unsure he'd heard correctly. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you, Tucker Knox." Willow's smile bloomed as certainty filled her. "Yes, I want us to be a family officially, openly." Tucker's whoop of joy brought Mrs. Holloway hurrying from the parlor, concern on her face quickly replaced by delight as Tucker announced. She said yes. "Willow has agreed to be my wife." The wedding took place on New Year's Day, a symbol of fresh beginnings for both the couple and the town. The small church was filled to capacity, with even Harlan Mercer's Cowboys cleaning up and attending to wish the popular rancher well. Reverend Coleman officiated, his kind face beaming as he pronounced them husband and wife. Samuel, dressed in a tiny suit Emma had sewn for him, gurgled happily in Mrs. Holloway's arms as his parents exchanged vows. When Tucker kissed his bride, the assembled townspeople erupted in cheers and applause. The reception at the hotel was a joyous affair, with music and dancing continuing well into the evening. As Willow and Tucker moved among their guests, accepting congratulations, an elderly woman Willow didn't recognize approached them. "Mrs. Knox," she said, testing the new name. "I'm Judith Blackwell, Thomas Blackwell's sister. I've been visiting for the holidays." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Willow replied politely. "Your brother's ranch is in good hands with Tucker." "So I see." The old woman's sharp eyes moved between them. "You know, when Tucker bought the place, he told Thomas he was building a home for his future family. Said he'd lost someone precious and was determined to create a place worthy of her should he ever find her again." She smiled. "Seems he found her after all." Willow glanced at Tucker, who looked slightly embarrassed. "You never told me that." "Some things a man keeps in his heart," he said softly, "until the right moment to share them." As the celebration continued, Tucker was pulled away by well-wishers, leaving Willow momentarily alone with Samuel, who had grown fussy with all the excitement. She stepped onto the hotel's side porch for a moment of quiet, bouncing the baby gently. "There now, little one," she soothed. "It's been quite a day for all of us." "A beautiful day," Tucker's voice came from behind her as he joined them on the porch. "The first of many as a proper family." Willow leaned into his embrace, Samuel nestled between them. "I never imagined this when I stepped off the stagecoach 3 months ago. I was so determined to make my way alone." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "You're not alone anymore, Willow. You never will be again." Samuel, recognizing his father's voice, turned his head to look up at Tucker with those matching stormy blue eyes. Tucker smiled down at his son, then pressed a kiss to Willow's temple. "I want you both to come home with me tonight," he said, "to our house in town. It's small, but it's warm and ready for you." "Home," Willow repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, I'd like that very much." Later that night, with Samuel sleeping peacefully in the cradle, Tucker had crafted himself. Husband and wife stood at the window of their small house, watching snowflakes drift past in the moonlight. "Happy?" Tucker asked, his arms encircling her from behind. "Completely," Willow answered truthfully, "though I'm still in awe of how everything changed so quickly." Tucker chuckled softly. "Not quickly enough from my perspective. I've been waiting 2 years to make you my wife." Willow turned in his arms to face him. "There's something I've been wondering. That first day in church, when Mrs. Mitchell commented on Samuel's eyes, you nearly said something. What was it?" Tucker's expression grew serious. "I almost said he was mine all along." The words were right there, wanting to be spoken. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It was the hardest thing I've ever done, standing silently while you introduced our son as yours alone. He was always ours," Willow acknowledged. "I just needed time to accept that we could be a family." "And now we are," Tucker said, drawing her closer. "Officially, permanently, exactly as we were meant to be." As the new year unfolded, the Knox family settled into a rhythm. The general store reopened in February, with Tucker and Willow managing operations while Mr. Phelps continued his recovery. By spring, they had moved to the ranch, though they maintained the townhouse for nights when work kept them late. Samuel thrived under the loving attention of both parents, growing sturdy and strong in the clean mountain air. His first word, appropriately, was a jubilant "Pa," shouted from the porch as Tucker returned from working with the horses. His second, moments later, was "Ma," as he turned to make sure Willow had witnessed his accomplishment. The truth about Samuel's parentage became common knowledge gradually, though few seemed surprised. Most townsfolk had already noticed the striking resemblance between father and son, and the romantic story of their separation and reunion only enhanced the community's affection for the family. 1 year after their wedding, Willow stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching Tucker teach a now toddling Samuel how to feed the chickens. The little boy's laughter rang out across the yard as he scattered corn with enthusiastic, if uneven, distribution. Willow's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, where their second child was growing. They had agreed to name the baby Theodore if it was a boy, not after Tucker's father, but after Willow's grandfather, a kind man who had encouraged her education when others thought it unnecessary for a girl. As she watched her husband and son, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain and separation that had once seemed insurmountable had led, ultimately, to this life of unexpected joy. The young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing but determination, and a tiny baby could never have imagined such happiness, awaited her. Tucker looked up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, full of love and contentment, warmed her more than the spring sunshine. He whispered something to Samuel, who immediately turned and ran toward Willow on unsteady legs, arms outstretched. "Mama," he called. "Up," Willow scooped him up, covering his chubby face with kisses as Tucker joined them on the porch. "Telling family secrets to the chickens again," she teased. "Just reminding our son how lucky we are," Tucker replied, wrapping an arm around her waist. "How fortunate that you found the courage to start anew in Wildridge, that I had the sense to settle here, that fate brought us together again. And that you were patient enough to wait for me to be ready," Willow added softly. Tucker's hand covered hers where it rested on her belly. "Some things are worth waiting for, some people are worth searching for, no matter how long it takes." Samuel wiggled to be put down, eager to return to his important chicken feeding duties. As he toddled off, Tucker pulled Willow into a proper embrace. "I love you, Mrs. Knox," he murmured against her hair. "More today than yesterday, less than tomorrow." "And I love you," Willow replied, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "My patient, persistent, perfect husband." Together they watched their son, the living embodiment of their love, as he explored his world with the fearless curiosity of childhood. The past, with its pain and misunderstandings, had faded, replaced by the vibrant present and the promise of a future built on truth, trust, and abiding love. In Wildridge, the story of Tucker Knox and Willow Nilsen became something of a local legend, how a young widow arrived with a baby she claimed as hers alone, only to find the child's father already established in town, waiting for a family he'd never stopped believing in. How love, tested by separation and strengthened by adversity, had ultimately prevailed. And in the years that followed, as their family grew and their ranch prospered, Tucker and Willow would sometimes look at each other across a room full of children and remember those first uncertain days, the tentative rebuilding of trust, the gradual healing of old wounds, and the moment when secrets gave way to honesty, allowing love to flourish once more.